Yeah, so I guess welcome to live miles, not live, but video recorded
Pseudo
miles to
live.
matches. Yeah, this is something we don't do on purpose, just because it's just normally Francis and I driving to matches in a car. So this is kind of exciting. We're at Area 419 today.
Yes, we are. And if you ask Garmin, when you punch in where you're going to go, or Google, it'll say Area 419. And
Yeah.
Craig would have been pissed if he had seen.
Look. That's a long-standing rumor, mostly proliferated by Frank Galley, that we get upset about 419. We don't care. If someone asks what's the correct way to say it, well, it's a area code of a phone number.
Yeah.
So anyone think about the area code of your specific cell phone number, and you would not say, like, mine's 573 because I'm from Southeast Missouri. I would never say 573 when reading
No,
someone
you
my
wouldn't.
phone number. So we truly don't care.
Exactly.
Okay,
Well, if you
Mike-
call the ATF for your NICS check and they give out the numbers for your Social Security or repeat it back, or your FFL, like, it's always weird cadence, like something you would not expect. I think it's just because they get bored and they want to just rattle it off as fast as possible. But yeah, we're all familiar with phone numbers and area codes and stuff like that. So I think it's important to get it right.
yeah.
Area 419.
Well, we wanted to be here specifically because we love Area 419, what you bring to the
We
community.
love you too.
Well, we love what you guys do for the community of shooting sports. I mean, I was fortunate enough that when I started, my first matches were at Rayners Range in Ohio. Your first matches, we'll get into that. But I met you between Rayners and Southington, not Rayners, Southington / TVP.
Yep.
That was the sort of the circuit that I had to drive from mid-Michigan, 8-ish hours, 7 to 8 hours south to get to those facilities. And this guy comes up who kind of just says, "Why are you shooting MOA? Get a millscope," and just walks away. And enter Craig. So
I remember talking to you on the phone in Yawberg, back when we were in the old
Yeah.
shop in John's backyard, about
Yes.
building a rifle, and we built a rifle for you
Yeah.
forever. And I don't even remember the specs of the rifle. I'm sure you do, because you're the guy that does.
I do. Yeah.
But yeah, that was shoot. We haven't built rifles on scale in years.
Yeah.
It's
It was
something we've
6,
got to
7. It
learn
was 6.5 years ago. So it's pushing some time. That said, this place is it brings me back to the first time that I started shooting. Not this place, but the concept, what Area 419 has done for the sport, what you've done for the sport, your trajectory as an individual within the sport, and helping grow this with John, between you, John, and the team. It's incredible to see how much it's grown.
Well, what blows me away, my first time coming to 419 was like the grand opening of this place, I
Okay,
think.
yeah.
And
That would have been early 21.
as a manufacturing engineer, having my own manufacturing company at one point with close to 50 employees, like, it is super impressive to see what you guys have built here, the level of equipment you've invested in, and then the products you put out. Like, nobody is going to be disappointed when they grab an Area 419 product off their website, or they see one at a match. Like, it's overwhelming. Your expectations are far exceeded when you get the product in your hand, and that's what I love about it. I can trust it. A new product comes out, and I think that's a pretty good idea. How could somebody have made something that much better? And then you get it, you're like, well, okay, this is how they did it, and then they also exceeded my expectations on top of it. Just something that's, I mean, I saw a lot of these at 5x5 Precision. I recommend it to everyone, and I tell them, I mean, all the brakes do a great job. This is the Hellfire original,
Yeah.
right? And the Hellfire match is no exception. A lot of brakes do the same thing, but the adapter, to me, is what makes this system between the brake and the suppressor, which is kind of what we're going to get into here in a few minutes. The adapter makes the system because it's so easy to have 0 point of impact shift. You can take it apart to clean it. You can put it back together and know that, I mean, we can go right to the first stage of the match and know that our gun is going to be at the same point of impact.
So when these started coming out, it was fall 2016. And by the time they were really in circulation, it's spring of 2017, I'm shooting matches in Missouri, kind of that area. I lived in Southeast Missouri at the time. And the way I sold these to people is they would walk up and ask about it, because it was new kid on the block. They might have
Out
had
of that
something
little
familiar
trailer.
with me. No, we didn't have the trailer then.
Oh,
this
this is before
this
the
is when
trailer.
I'm like
Wow.
driving
Okay.
a sedan from my home in Missouri. We're way before that. And I would take my brake off in the middle of a match between stages and hand it to them and say, check it out. And people look at me like, dude,
Oh, yeah.
what did you just do? Are you stupid?
Yeah.
I was like, first of all, maybe. But it doesn't matter, and that's how we sold them. And there's always been this underlying design principle and thought principle that any product we make, if you go, and we're all spoiled as shooters, that there's so much good stuff
it's
in the market
amazing,
today. In any category of product, there's 3, 4, 5, 6 options that are really excellent. And there are other really amazing manufacturers in the game. So how can we make a product that absolutely fits into that category, but then find a couple little creature comforts or differences or one little performance different? How do we find that little bit of sauce, that little bit of separation? Because any product we make, we expect to be as good as anything on the market. But then what can we do that might solve a little nuanced problem that when you're deciding between two products that are from a performance level both very good and are in a similar price bracket, whatever, where's that little sauce, that little thing that takes a guy like you guys, you've seen everything, you own everything. If there's anything on the market you want, you can have it. Like, it's available to you. So what's that one little thing?
Yeah.
You know what? Yeah. How do we find that? How do we find that edge? And sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's quite difficult. Our scope mount line, the rings and the mounts, they've exploded for us, especially in the back half of this year. And it came down to for years we've talked about, well, should we make a scope ring?
The market's flooded with them, right?
Well, and the answer has always been not until we really figure something out.
Yeah.
Not until we really find something. So like with these, you start tacking on, I bet if we manufacture them this way and then we final bore them together, that can work. Well, what if we leave it raw? Well, what if we put the pins on it to bring it the cap straight down? And what about attachment methods and something super robust as well as something super versatile? And you start stacking all these things up. And we live in a world of stack out there. Tolerance stack, very real. We avoid it like the plague.
Yeah.
But on this side, in design and in marketing and in engineering, it's how do we take these small things, a small feature, but then stack a bunch of it together. And just like tolerance stack out there can totally ruin a part. On the design side, when you start stacking these little incremental improvements or incremental features, suddenly you've got something super real.
Well, that's part of the challenge of it, and that's kind of what makes it fun, and that's why we appreciate you guys going after things like that. And I think it's another reason why the market isn't flooded with super awesome scope mounts like this that have all that functionality and all the adaptability. I think that people are intimidated by it, and you talk about tolerance stack up. I mean, it seems like a nightmare to me, and as a one-man shop these days, like, I stay away from nightmares. I work on sure things that can help me incrementally improve, but you guys have a solid book of business, and then you're looking at doing things that are uncomfortable, and you look at something like the Zero and building a press that
I think was terrifying. Still is.
I mean, the machinery that you guys invested in to be able to build that press is insanity. I don't want to leave the scope mount because I did want to make one more comment. You said you took your break off at a match to show people. I think you should show up and start hanging out with us, and every stage you should take your scope off the rifle and put it back on. Because
I know
think you'll
that it
be
would
just
be
fine.
quite close. We had a major manufacturer of firearms that is going through a project of trying to figure out, when they're selling in contract, what scope mounts might they use? Is that some, how do they want to play the game with scope mounts? Because they don't really get into them now. And they got our mount and then a pile of other popular mounts, all name brands that you would know, and put them through a battery of tests built by their engineering team. And in every test they ran, we were number 1 or number 2. And when you look at, here's 6, 7, 8 different performance tests, nobody else hit everything like that. And and the ones that we might have been number 2, very tight margins. We're at the very, very top of every test they ran. And that's when we knew, we shipped it out to somebody. They knew that our feelings didn't matter. It was a pre-written test, and it wasn't measured by how you feel about it, rather by what happens under stress, what happens in repeatability, real testing.
They weren't even shooting the mounts yet, were they?
No, not at the mounts.
Yeah,
No.
if you haven't
That's
seen
fun.
that video, go to Area 419's social media pages and go find the YouTube video and or the social shorts where they are quite literally shooting a target inside of a mount, so you can see what happens with that system. And they also have a torque test
Yeah.
where you did a big
The
torque.
grip
It's just
function.
super cool to watch.
And that's a way of illustrating. First of all, people love watching that stuff.
Yeah,
It's just
I
a
did.
chaotic way
It
to do
was super
testing.
fun.
But it's also important that a scope mount, its core function is to hold your optic as securely as possible and do it while imparting the least stress possible.
Well, you're not doing it by adding extra screws. I mean, you only got 2 per side. Some mounts have 3.
Yeah.
You're not doing it by increasing the torque values of it. It's,
Well, and in designing these, we met with various manufacturers of optics. One of them told us, and it was very stark, they said, look, 80% of our warranty issues are due to mounting. So that, and especially, in the US, we're a little better at it, but especially around the world where people don't mount their own optics, they go to some gunsmith that might think, well, more is better on torque, which
Yeah.
sometimes it is, but largely it's not. especially with optics. And they said, we have a warranty pitch, like people call in and they say, look, we need you to ship this in the mounting. And they'll take optics out of the mounts, and they're dents in the tubes, and all of these things going on. And if you have hot spots, if your internal bore of the mount is not actually circular and it's not actually on size, you get a hot spot. And especially back here in an optic, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things. Those lenses, especially in the rear end of an optic, are not fixed.
Yeah.
So wonder what's causing problems. In a significant majority of cases with optics, it's actually the mounting.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, all of that said, part of the reason that we wanted to talk with you specifically is to talk, what have you seen? You started shooting in about 2014, 2015?
I started shooting matches in 16.
Okay. From that point forward.
Stopped in 17.
What would
Stopped
you say?
After 21.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
short but great career. A guy who was able to go to Collis, I remember 2021-ish.
It was 2019.
Going to Collis and finishing in the top 10 or just
What
outside
a
of the
map.
top 10.
And
you just
I'm
walked
still
up
mad at Patrick
you shoulda
Proctor.
won
I
that.
don't name any people or any brands, but what happened with that whole cheating thing? I'm pissed.
Yeah.
Still mad.
You were going to win that match.
Man,
on a tear. This guy.
that would have been the perfect way to end it.
It's just, if very few people who are still shooting the sport have had the privilege of watching Craig shoot. He's known as Gumby because he has
the guy can
the
just
ability
get
to
in
get
any
into any
Still
position.
the most flexible guy you know.
Oh, by far, and then some. It should be illegal in, I think, at least 3 states.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't go to West Virginia.
Yeah, exactly. But Craig walks up to a match. He's just like, yeah, I'm ready to go, but I got to go sell and work some stuff. He's up at the tent in the trailer working for right up until the end of train up day, and he hasn't touched a rifle. He's like, I got to go zero quick. I watch you walk down, shoot 5 or 10 rounds, go back up. Yeah, I'm good. And then just proceed to annihilate the match and just drop, I don't know, maybe it was 10 or 15 shots. And then I think there was one pseudo not great stage, but it was the last stage or second to last
after
stage
the
of the
cheating
day.
thing blew up. I was getting ready to go take the stage, and from one stage to another, the target distance only changed 70 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to the left of the movers at K&M. You got the targets that are behind those cars.
Yes.
And the stage before was 400 yards, and those
Off the
were
concrete.
and those were 450 to 5. Maybe
Easiest
all
stages of the
450.
match.
Yeah. But I didn't change my elevation before the stage because the whole cheating thing blew up.
Yeah.
And Patrick Proctor runs to me because we're sponsoring him at the time. Shannon chases him at Mock Jesus on a side-by-side to get to me too. And then all this is blowing up, and the RO hollers, Craig, you're up. And I'm like, oh, guy, and my magazine was loaded, so I just sent it because my brain's on everything else. And shot 2 out of 12 because I was missing this low. At that distance, I wasn't thinking elevation. You would never miss because of elevation on a head target at that distance from prone. So I'm shooting both sides, back and forth, left and
Just couldn't find it. Yeah.
yeah, and it K&N, that's one of those matches where a few shots makes all the difference.
Massive difference.
Even back then, if you were down 20 points, you're out of it for the whole match.
Yeah,
so.
half of my misses for the match were that stage.
So, full circle then. From starting in 2016 through, let's call it the end of your competitive career, but into developing products, what are the major sort of milestones that you've seen within the industry that have, I guess, changed your perception of what, say, PRS is or where PRS/precision rifle is going? Because I think there are a few of them you have specific insights into.
The accessibility factor has exploded, right? So in 2016, getting a rifle that really shot was a process.
Yes.
Today, you can go on, pick 2, 3, 4 websites, and you can buy an action. You can buy a pre-fit for that action. You can buy a really good stocker chassis that it drops straight into. Triggers are excellent. Shoot, back in the day, you'd buy a handful of triggers from leading brands and then find the one that actually felt good. Now they're pretty bomb-proof. I know, and I love Trigger Tech and that team, but Tim me the same way. And the E-Trigger, if that ever happens, the number of triggers you can go buy, and they all drop in and they all work. Boom, huge number of them. You can put together a really, really tight shooting rifle simply and with
Overnight.
Overnight.
It used to be a year-long process.
Yeah, and you'd order a stock, and I've always been and loved Manners and their product, but you want a Manners, and it was 6 to 12 months, and then you might need it to be bedded, and then this whole process. Basically, a gunsmith had to do everything. Now, I can take anyone, send them an email full of links, and in a week they've put together with parts that they've shipped in and were on the shelf their own rifle that's banger. So the accessibility of the really high-end gear is better than it ever has been.
I think not to oversimplify it, though, you still have to have an understanding. You still have to understand weapons maintenance, torque values. You still have to be willing to read instructions and put it together
point
properly.
number 2 to this, though, is the amount of content about what we do has exploded.
Yes.
You guys have, I don't know how many hours of Miles to Matches podcast there are, but it's a
130-ish?
lot.
Yeah, there's at least 130.
I can't imagine if I sit a new shooter down and they listen to every one of those podcasts, what have they not heard? They've heard everything.
Yeah.
You know, you go back 10 years and there's some voodoo witch magic that, you know, the old guy at the match might give you little nuggets of, or you might pick up from this other discipline, or the amount of content and how to build that rifle. There's all of these guides of
Gavin's
how to put
putting
them
out
together.
stuff and-
Yes, everyone's putting out things.
Yeah.
So the amount of information available. So you've got the availability of parts and components, and you've got the availability of information that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then the ability to put that into action. There's more matches today than there's ever been because, you know, the 22 matches didn't exist at that time.
Yeah, those didn't start till 22-ish.
PRS was kind of amorphous. You know, it went through the weird transition of ownership. Shannon ultimately stabilized it. Now Ken's taken that and is doing a good job with a stable product. But it was really unstable for a period of time. So 22 now exists. You've then got offshoot products that are quite good, like the NRL Hunter type stuff. Different flavor. Overall, quite a bit of similarity. But it allows people to kind of dial in what they want to do with it. So the availability of the sport and the way that the sport has then, it's tailorable to exactly what you want it to be. So much better today
Yeah.
than it was then. And also the skill is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Targets have gotten smaller. Props have gotten different or more challenging or more intricate. Stage design has gotten more intricate. And guys are still shooting ridiculous scores.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of curious, since I don't see you as much, and I'm not going to keep harping on the fact that you're not shooting. But,
Shoot on that.
but how do you guys stay current? Listen, like,
Yeah.
you guys
It is
are obviously listening to
incredible.
people, and you and I talk a few times a year. We don't talk weekly or monthly, but when we talk, it's kind of more meaningful family type stuff usually. But how do you guys keep your finger on the pulse and decide where you're going to invest your next $1 million in equipment and capital and go down the R&D for something like this? I mean, we're going to get to the Maverick.
Sure.
I want to finish with it, but
Yeah.
but I mean, how do you guys decide that is worth, you know, you investing time, effort, money, and energy in?
So we have advantages today that we didn't have 6-8 years ago. And a lot of those come from being more connected to the industry and knowing where it's going and knowing how it's moving. You know, I can make, John can make, Justin can make, Nathan, Zach. We can all make phone calls today that we couldn't make a handful of years ago. That's super helpful. We do also have quite a bit of, you know, it ebbs and it flows, but we still have people in the shop that go shoot commonly. We also are beneficiaries of, like I talk about, information availability. I can watch lots of matches without going to them.
Yeah.
And it's very useful, you know. And when I was shooting a lot of matches, and 20 and 21 were the years that I kind of peaked in what I was doing, as far as being out. And now my kids are 11 and 9. I get one shot at my kids
feel the
being
same way.
elementary, middle, high school aged and in my house. I've only got like 9 years of hand-to-hand combat parenting left.
Yeah.
Matches will still be there,
Yeah.
and I'll go back and shoot them. And you know, there will be times for me to shoot a little bit more, a little bit less. But right now, I'm at home raising my kids. It's the most important thing I'll do in my entire life is be a husband and a father.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that now. But as far as being connected with what's happening in the sport, the sport is fundamentally unchanged in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Now it's gotten better in certain ways. There's some tweaks. But fundamentally,
Yes.
it's the same. You then have some rules and categories and divisions, and like we talked about with suppressor. But I mean, the suppressor division, and I'll mess up division, class, and category 6 times during this. So please, Ken, forgive me. But the idea of the Maverick, that's not changed. You know, in this is a 5-year-old product now, and there may be times where this is iterated or changed as a product, but the way that a firearm works hasn't changed. The basic challenges of all of these products are virtually unchanged. We're also comfortable with who we are as kind of an accessory component company. So as other people roll out a new rifle or a new system, or there's some new trend among military law enforcement, or some new trend happening among shooters, it's easy for us, because of the time that was spent in and we're still in, as well as the public nature of everything that happens at matches, we can still stay quite connected to it. So we benefit from our position in the market as a company that's grown, as well as the realities of shooting, like we talked about, with everything being so accessible.
Yeah. And you tend to have products that are considered upmarket, high-end product. They're not entry level by any means. And as a result of that, you're generally going to see people who are more experienced gravitating towards high-end products. And with more experience, a lot of the time, you're also going to get a lot of product requests.
Sure.
So you're getting, I'm certain, I mean, we have talked ad nauseum about, hey, man, do you think you'll ever get into insert thing? Can you do this? Can you make that? Exactly, yeah. Hey.
So in product development, seeds product development. So with
Correct.
dies, when we were developing the Zero, and this is like 2019, making them and testing them, we end up rolling out that product in early 2020. When we were going through all of the testing on the Zero, that's when we realized we needed to make dies, because we were testing dies. We don't do bushings, because in the whole process of testing the die and concentricity and run out and all of these things in the necks, I was doing this, and I was talking to Jim Borden is a guy that I'm fortunate to consider a friend. He's one of only a handful of living bench rest Hall of Famers. And I could call Jim and say, dude, why am I seeing what's happening? And I'd hear a story from when I was in diapers that was so far ahead of its time. Jim had figured something out at the time. Or Lou Merdika is a guy that I'm, again, fortunate to count among friends. And I could call Lou and say, Lou's got a test tunnel in his basement. He's all the way in. He's still one of the best trigger pullers walking around. And he'd say, I've seen something like that. And Lou would FaceTime me and spin around to his bench and pull something off of it that was a one of one that was made for him at some point, and say, have you ever seen this? I was like, no, Lou, you know that's the only one that exists. And product development begets product development. So we make the press and then realize, well, here's something that we're kind of missing in dies, and we can't go buy somewhere. So the original cutaway design of this die I had on like a Clinton aluminum, one of our aluminum providers, notepad draw sheet from 2019. And it's now it's December 11th, and yesterday we put the S-Series dies in stock for the first time.
Yeah.
So that's one that for 5 years had sat on a piece of paper that we worked through and refined and changed, and it turned into the M-Series die, and now it just
wasn't needed, and it wasn't time, and you learn more, and then you figure out what you don't really know.
Sure. And you make a product, and then the next part of that product isn't quite right, or like the thing that it attaches to, or the thing that attaches to it. So, can we make that? Should we make that? What's the next prudent product, looking at investment, time, opportunity cost, our market? Like any company that's doing what we're doing, there is in this building a whiteboard with 20 products on it that we could go to market, that we could start working on or making tomorrow. And we have to get together as a team, from John all the way down through the organization, and say, we could make this, but this is a problem for this person, and this is going to affect this in a positive or negative way, or we think this has a lot of opportunity because of this. So it's sometimes quite simple, and at other times kind of intricate. Sometimes it's based in fact, sometimes it's guessing. But
we've touched on a few things there that make me proud to be even part of this circle. The fact that you said that you can call Jim or you can call Lou, there's no shielding of information for the better good or the incremental improvement of the components of the shooters. Like, we're sharing more shooter type stuff. I know Cortina said in one of his podcasts that he called up John and said, thinking about opening up a shop. Like, am I crazy? Like, what machines would you recommend? And the circle of friends that are also pseudo competitors. I mean, I know Cortina makes dies, Chambers rifles. We're all in this same space, and for the sake of the benefit of the shooter, the consumer, the industry as a whole, we're all pushing each other to be better. And I'm happy to reciprocate that. I get calls from other gunsmiths that are up and coming, and I'll always answer the phone and say, here, this is what I do and why I do it. I feel like I'm just proud to be a part of that and to give that back and to share that. It's really cool.
And we absolutely see it. There are some companies that don't operate that way, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But the ones that do, 201, you could look at them and say,
well, then they all rise to the top
you're growing
together.
more quickly.
Yes.
Or you're succeeding in more ways, or finding new opportunities, because, firearm, it is largely in the consumer market, a hobby business, but like a hobby tool type business. It's still quite professional.
Yeah.
The companies that are built with high functioning professionals that understand that working together works, as well as, sometimes you got to play your own game. When you operate at a really high level professionally, it works here too. This is not dissimilar from automotive or tech or whatever, that know how to do good business, know how product design works, how manufacturing works, how marketing works, all of these components go together, and you win. And if you make it once you leave the hobby personal portion of it, as you've seen with 5x5, that it was at one point kind of a thing that you were doing as a side hustle or a hobby, and then as you become more professional with it and get deeper into it, Francis, your interactions with various organizations, now you're with MDT, in the firearm world, the more professional it gets, and the more of a real business it's treated as, and doesn't even have to become, but treated as, the better things go. You don't have to be a huge shop. You're a one-man shop.
Yeah.
But you're a great professional, so you're going to grow as fast as you want to grow.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate when you text me or call me after I put in a big order for your products, and you're like, "Hey, man, thanks for the order." Like,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty dang cool.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a common theme among all those companies that you described that are all like rising to the top. I think they look inward instead of like trying to defend what they have. They look inward and they have this like confidence of what they provide and their customer service and the products that they make stand alone, and they don't have to defend that to anyone else. Like,
it's a really big pie. This
you
is
guys
not
are-
some
it's
zero-sum
huge.
game.
Yeah.
We're making dice. We are not going to materially hamper the ability of anyone else that makes dies to sell dies. Not going to happen.
Nope.
It-
Yep.
The only thing that hampers dies is the lack of nitrocellulose in powder.
Yeah,
That's the only thing that's hurting
will-
reloading right
That'll
now.
put a hurt on it for
Yeah,
sure.
$60 a pound powder is a little
Yeah,
more
go
difficult
to
to
plastic
swallow
cases,
than
we may have a
25.
problem.
Yeah, than 25 was. But
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you've, in general theme, what you've described is sort of the same philosophy that we started this podcast on, the idea that the two of us would be able to learn from each other at a faster rate and get further faster and be better for it. And what you've described is the way that you work, not only within the industry, but within your partners within the sport, your partners within the industry, that cooperative approaches tend to be the best approach to not only find the right customers, keep the right customers, and make the right products, so that those incremental improvements transfer to the end users. And we see it every day when we open and use products.
Yeah.
I just got the comparator kit for the first time,
things
and I'm
wild.
like, I had the Hornady comparator kit for years. It was actually the very first tool I ever purchased for reloading in 2012.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Headspace, measure the headspace of this little clamp. And then I got yours. After 12, 13 years, I got yours. And I took it out of the box and went, oh, I'm just going to get a nicer version of this gauge. I was so wrong.
You were wrong.
It's just not just
so,
nice.
So two words
It's
that you
like-
use that are important too is the Hornady product. It's very much a comparator.
Yeah,
Ours, we took the approach of gauging
exactly.
because when we walk out on the floor, our metrology or our measurement tools are not a guess or a comparator. They need to be precise and exact. They're calibrated. We have the ability to verify those things. We can, from one to another, we can throw things on the CMM. We really know what things are. And we know that in that sharing of information, if I'm looking for what's the right headspace,
Yeah.
I can't call you if we're both just using comparator products. I can't call you and say what's the number, because compared to what?
Yeah.
But with a gauge, I can call you and say what's the number, and you can say, okay, so I'm using the 350 thousandths insert for the shoulder. Make sure you zero it out at the bottom, but here's your number.
Mm-hmm.
And if I hit that number, I'm really, really, really close to what you're holding in your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was a problem that I saw after we started the podcast. We have people reaching out, hey, help me with loading. I'm seeing this problem, or I'm trying to bump my shoulder this, or hey, my cartridge is still hard to chamber, even after 3,000 bump is the most I can get, and I'm bottomed out. And I'm like, I've seen this before, and I've seen it as a result of using a comparator that maybe had different designs that didn't actually give you the right, I'll just say the interface didn't allow for the measurement you were trying to achieve, and it actually pointed to an error in a sizing die that you couldn't resolve with just a standard comparator tool.
Mm-hmm.
I got yours, and I'm like, honestly, as soon as I saw it, I measured it, and I'm like, well, here's what I would do. First, try this, and as soon as, if you can, go buy this kit from 419. Tell me what you're getting, because just like you said, in
The number's the
podcast,
number now.
I can now say, I got this number. Cool. You're actually at, other than me not knowing how deep your chamber is, I can tell you that factory normal brass will measure this, and if you're not getting to that, And it's easy to measure that plus the base. I can tell you it should fit. Otherwise, you aren't bumping at all. And that's what he found.
One of the coolest collaborative efforts that we're in the middle of right now is really with Alpha munitions. So when you're a brass manufacturer, the number one and number 1A thing right next to one another that cause problems for you are dies that are out of spec and chambers that are out of spec. They don't control those, right? They make brass. And then if your chamber's not right or your die's not right, it doesn't care what the brass is. You're going to have problems, especially if that chamber and those dies are also not right next to one another.
Yeah.
You have to have this triangle of things that work.
Yeah.
And Alpha's like, well, we're not going to make dies and we're not going to cut chambers, but we can make reamers.
We'll make the reamers. Yeah.
And they now have their Alpha Legacy reamers that are with gunsmiths. I'm sure you have them. Gunsmiths have them all over the place. And, Dasher is a good example. If you call JGS and say, hey, I want a 6 Dasher, they have hundreds of reamers to choose from. And you might think, oh, selection's great for the community. That's a bad thing.
Bad.
I'm going to look into the camera
really
and say that's a bad thing for you. Because you just want the spec to be the spec.
Yeah.
So they start making the reamers. And then we call them. We're like, hey, we've been working on making dies for a long time. We want them to basically size you back to new brass with the ability to obviously set your headspace. Will you make reamers? Because we reamer cut all of our dies, and that's more expensive, and it limits some of our cartridge selection, but it's the right way to do it. And we said, will you help us design these reamers so that we're certain that our dies and your brass and the chambers cut with the reamers that you're selling are all correct? Because for reloaders from you guys who are reloading a dumb amount of ammo and are excellent at it, all the way to a guy who's picking it all up for the first time. They follow that email full of links. They listen to the podcast. They built this rifle. Now they want to reload. Yeah. How do we make it just bomb-proof for them? We don't want them to have to guess. Let's save years of figuring out all these problems. And that effort's been awesome. And, as we go through iterative steps of that, it's how do we start to publish, here's what your headspace should be with our gauging relative to a chamber that is cut to, go plus 0. And it can be a few thousandths longer than that and certainly still be in spec. Here's what it should all look like. It's a solvable problem, but it requires teamwork, and the teamwork works.
Yeah. The sum of your reloading products in totality, I think, can't be understated to how many are on my bench and how simple it's made my reloading process over the course of the years. The M series die to be able to just go, oh, I'm about 1,000 short. I'm no longer 1,000 short.
It's bang on now.
I can't. To anybody who hasn't tried one, if you have a 0 and you can get the 1 1/4 turret, the M series die is unbelievable. Obviously, you just launched a new die.
I still don't have one yet.
I know.
These are all solvable problems.
I know.
These are. Yeah,
we have some on hand.
There's this place we know that has a lot of them. But so moving away from dies, but reloading is one thing. Once you've made that ammo, which is really where I think you got your start in rifles, but then moved to reloading, the funnel kits and the small accessories. And then it transitioned into bigger products. And one of those products that we absolutely love is the suppressor.
Yes.
We both transitioned into
Maverick
the Maverick. Oh gosh,
I remember you trying it out
was
at K&M that same weekend.
It was
of that match.
Yeah, maybe
it was the first time I shot
2020
ACC. It was the end of 2019. You had a prototype.
Yeah, so I showed up to the finale at the end of 19.
That's what it was.
With one that was raw and naked and was not honestly in the form that this one is now, but it was kind of the early rev. And I spoke at the finale. Shannon gave me the opportunity to say, hey, by the way, guys, this is a new thing. If you're here, we'll hook you up with special pricing on this because you guys need them more than anyone. And when the Maverick kind of came to be, it's earlier that year, beginning of 19, John and I are sitting next to one another on the Plane to Shot Show. And you can credit the existence of the Maverick to Leviathan suppressors, which is a time machine and a funny story for many people listening to this, some people at least. A guy came out with a suppressor that he promised would reduce recoil. And past what any other suppressor does to reduce recoil, we got into the conversation of this isn't really possible.
Yeah.
Unless it's just a brick. And that's most of what it was. The suppressors were huge and heavy, so they did a good job of dampening on the end. We thought, how would we make a suppressor that actually reduces recoil, that uses more than weight and basic suppressor design to help us? So the functional design was, okay, let's say you take a suppressor and you cut it in half and then put a brake on it in the middle.
Sounds stupid, right?
Sounds really stupid. But here we go. And
the best ideas are like that. Like, just let's not be crazy for a second. Let's just try it.
In a like a 15-second class on how a brake fundamentally works is you have super high pressure, high volume gas leaving your muzzle when you uncork around. It hits those baffles, it slams into them, and the momentum of that gas against that baffle tries to move that rifle forward, basically counteracting the recoil. It's effectively a parachute, and instead of gravity pulling you down and pushing the air into the parachute, you're running 15, 20,000 psi out of the end of the muzzle, and that air is blasting into those baffles and pushing forward. That's basically how a brake works. And there had been suppressors on the market that were good suppressors. Silencer Co. Omega is a good example of it at the time. That they would put a brake on the end of it. But we knew that wasn't really doing what it wanted to do, because the Silencer Co. Omega is the most sold 30 cal like common suppressor ever.
Yeah.
And it did a really good job of slowing down that gas, because for a suppressor to make it quieter, it needs to slow down that gas, slow down that pressure, so that pop out of the end is significantly less dramatic. So if it's doing that effectively as a suppressor, and then you put a brake on the end, back to our analogy, you're not getting the push into those baffles that you need to really make it work. So if your suppressor was half as effective, you cut it in half, and then you put a brake on the end, you still have enough high pressure, fast moving gas to interact with those baffles, and suddenly we can split the difference. And literally the Maverick in this form is splitting the difference between a full featured actually quiet suppressor, and the Maverick in the 8-inch or the 9.2 configuration really is quiet, like it's a fully functional quiet suppressor. Or you can cut it in half, put a brake on the middle, and take a less functional suppressor, but it's still working, and then have enough gas left over to interact with those baffles, and the Maverick is born. And in that time period, 2020, 2021, I was shooting quite a few matches. That's when I was dragging the trailer around the country.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I would shoot day one pretty well, wake up day two and feel hungover. And
and not because you were actually drinking. I mean,
No.
I've seen you. You had a drink or two.
yeah,
and not
I would wake up in the morning and
Yeah.
it felt like I had tied one on the night before. My
Yeah.
brain's all swimmy. You're in this fog. You're trying hard to focus downrange. It doesn't want to do it. And basically what had happened is brakes are really loud. They create a lot of pressure back to the shooter. So when that high pressure gas hits those baffles, it's then redirected. And that pressure wave comes and washes back over you. And when you do that 100 or 120 times in day one of a 2-day match, that sustained beating, it disorients you a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's some wear and tear that, just like a hangover, it goes away, but you still have it the next morning.
And some of it doesn't.
Sure.
To be perfectly blunt,
It's
it's
hard.
not just the 100, 120. It's also the other 10 guys. So it's 1,000
Guys next to you.
near you
Yeah.
when you're zeroing. And Friday is the scariest day at any match that I'm at, where I'm running a Maverick, but the two guys running, if they've got the little bastard and the fat bastard from way back when.
Any of your
Any
common
brake,
high
any
performance brakes.
Even like anything like these 3-port, 4-port brakes, so they redirect a lot of flow.
Yeah.
They are brutal. And when they go off, you feel like you just got your bell rung, and
Yep.
that will stick with me. I can't actually be next to someone with a brake for more than about one shot.
I got to get
If I get two, I will have a headache by the end of that night.
I feel like you also can't say that it goes away over time, because it's hard to determine
Sure.
what stays with you cumulative. I mean, we shoot 10,000 plus rounds a year.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't transitioned to the Maverick in 2021. I know I was late to the party. You were shooting it for a year before me, but I don't like change, and I was very nervous to change anything with, in the signal chain of the barrel.
Yeah.
And man, I'm glad I did. I know there's people switching today still. You guys had the Black Friday sale, I think, and
Sold a pile of them.
and sold a pile of them. So it's definitely the demand for them is not waning. It's in fact the opposite.
And we've now got the suppressed class or division,
Yeah.
Yes.
which adds.
Yeah.
We also have other companies making similar theoretical products. Thunder
Yeah.
Beast and their RR line, they're good cans. They work.
100%.
Yeah, it's another good option. Or and they're not the only ones. But the idea of how do we make something where you get a good amount of the performance of a brake, but you also don't eat the huge decibel gain. So to get into sound breakdown, the way that decibels is not just a flat monolithic term. So there's dB, which is a measure of pressure. So sound comes at you in pressure waves.
Yep.
dB, when it's only those two, is simply a measure of sound pressure waves. That's how we publish our data here. because we think that the goal of the Maverick is managing that sound pressure. So compared to a bare muzzle, they're very, very, very similar. We publish it as a +1, but they are, from a pure sound pressure standpoint, incredibly similar to one another. There's then dBA, which includes intonation and then what the human ear hears. And that's when if we lined up 100 guys and said, I'm going to have you shoot this rifle one time bare muzzle and then another time with a Maverick, 100 of them will say it's quieter with a Maverick.
Yeah.
Because the intonation is lower, it's less cracky, it's less poppy. So, we're getting something that is, from a pure pressure standpoint, effectively the same, very, very similar to a bare muzzle, but from a sound is even lower. Now, people will fixate on that. When's the last time you saw a bare muzzle at a match? Never.
Yeah,
Never.
Never.
Maybe at one day, some guy coming in for the first time with their deer gun. You see some odd stuff at a 2-day match. I haven't seen one ever. Almost everyone is using, whether ours or someone else's, a high performance brake.
Yep.
The difference in sound in dB between a bare muzzle and a high performance brake can be 12 to 15 decibels pretty quickly. And if you understand how decibels work on scale, it's logarithmic. So your pressure or your sound level doubles every 6 decibels. So 12 decibels of gap is 4 times the sound and the pressure. So compared to a Hellfire or a Little Bastard or whatever, your popular brakes on the market, they all work quite well. With a Maverick, we're reducing the amount of pressure that comes back to you enormously, by what is often a factor of 4. Now, there are other brakes on the market that claim they're lower pressure. Cool. They're still much higher pressure than on shooter than a bare muzzle. And some guys, they're trying to build product around that. Like the Ace brake is a good product, and it's common, it's popular, and it's built around that. It still can't do what a Maverick or a Magnus
any
RR
suppressor.
or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
There's such an inherent advantage in a couple baffles and a short stack, even if it's not hearing safe, which this Maverick is not hearing safe.
No, not in this configuration.
But
It
it's
is
being a
absolutely not.
human safe is what we talk about. And you guys understand that deeply.
100%.
It's funny because what I didn't expect was to have like kind of a pleasurable experience and a good performance, what I felt to be a good performance result. When you think about a suppressor, you think about taking the recoil and increasing the time so that you reduce the feel of it and you can reduce the sound signature. This is like right in between. I've shot a lot of traditional suppressors, and I still do for hunting. But from a competitive standpoint, I really like the fact that this takes that duration of the recoil impulse and kind of it lengthens it with respect to a brake, but reduces it with respect to a traditional suppressor. And then your ports are kind of angled upward, so you also have that downforce. And you get a little. It's not the perfect at anything really. It's the perfect composition and balance of everything. And I'm glad I switched to it. I now have 3 of them. I paid for all 3 of them, so they're worth it in my opinion. And I'm glad I did. My hearing, my brain, and honestly, that concussion can make you lose time. Like it can just be taken away. As you look at how much time you have to watch a bullet go down range, if 25% of that is eliminated because your brain is actually concussed in a small form, then it can actually be the information can be removed and not even potential for you to see things going down range. I do not have that with the Maverick at all. I can literally see from the time I press the trigger till the time the bullet lands.
If I were to put an anvil on this table and grab a hammer and say, guys, I'm about to hit this anvil with this hammer.
Try to
Expect
keep
it, right?
your eyes open
And I smacked it. All 3 of us would go,
every time.
because it's just how we work.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens, when you shoot with a brake and you get that pop, your brain goes,
Whoa.
yeah. And like you're talking about, when you're trying to track trace or watch that bullet fly, watching a bullet land is very doable.
Yeah.
Watching one fly is much more difficult. And the margin between seeing one fly and not is incredibly narrow. So when you can pick up some percentage of that flight time and get it back using a Maverick, yes, you have a touch more recoil, but you have a chance.
Yeah.
And fundamentals in recoil management, a heavy gun with a light shooting caliber, like all of those things still come into your favor.
Yeah.
And all we want to do is give somebody a chance. I will never say buy our gear and you will win, but can we give you a better shot?
Yeah.
Yeah, the time frame you have once you blink, it's usually about 0.2 of a second, up to 3. So if you're blinking 50% of the time versus someone who's not blinking, you've immediately gained 2 to 0.3 of a second of time of flight. which means if you blink, I need to now figure out where has the gun moved while my eyes were closed. You reacquire the center of a reticle. There it is, but it's not on target. Oh, where's the target? It's down here. You find the target. Now, where should my bullet be? If you go through all of those iterations, a break will cause you to flinch unless you've shot thousands of rounds or using double ear pro and you can work your tail off to shoot through. It's very difficult to untrain a blink flinch with a break. As soon as you add this,
when this was new, I called the guy who had just recently won the Golden Bullet. And I can't remember if he had an SOT or one of his good buddies that he shot with a lot had an SOT, but I was able to send one to that SOT and he could use it immediately and try it. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, man, I know you just won the Golden Bullet. You're the best shooter on the planet right now. I guarantee you're blinking when you pull the trigger, because he's using a traditional break.
Does he even pull the trigger, or does he slap that?
You're giving away who it is. Yeah. With a running start, really. But excellent shooter.
Yeah,
the internet would be upset watching him smack a trigger. But I send it to him, and he calls me back a week later, and he was upset with me because he's like, I went out doing training, common training regimen he does, where he goes through a drill with 10 or 20 rounds, handful. Said, I shot my rifle just how it was. You know, it's my rifle. I know what it shoots like. I then take my break off, put the Maverick on, and shoot it. And you don't. He's like, couldn't really tell the difference right away, because when you go from a break to shooting Maverick for the first time, it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, it
is.
The impulse is different. You got to retime it, especially when you're shooting at that level. So and then after he went through that, he put his break back on, pulled the trigger one time, and goes, damn it, he was right.
Yeah.
Because, when you go back to that, that's when the difference becomes more stark. He pulls the trigger one time. And, he's not running the product today. He's got some other things going on. But he called me back, and it was the guy with the Golden Bullet, best shooter on the planet at the time. And he admitted to me, because, biomechanics are biomechanics. Our brains are our brains.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm blinking.
It's definitely different, so I can understand why people won't choose to use it, but I choose to use it because we shoot so much, and I have, like you said, it takes a minute for your brain. It only took me about 50 shots is what it took. And then I went to the club match at our local range. I won that match. Then I literally went to K&M and won my first ever pro match with it on there, and I was like, I'm hooked. It's not holding me back,
Yeah.
Timing was right. The gear was just, I feel like it gives me an advantage because I'm not thinking about recoil. I don't anticipate recoil. I took it this year to the World Championships and put it on the 308. And honestly, when I started the stage, I didn't think this rifle was going to beat me up compared to my BR. It was just my same old rifle. Like, it felt the same. It was balanced the same. Ergonomically, everything was the same. I had the Maverick. Everything felt the same, and it just worked.
A lot of people, especially new shooters, think that the difference between those who win and those that don't is either the gear that they have or raw round count of training. Both of those things are relevant, but the difference between the guy that wins the match and the guy that can't break into the top 25 is 99.8% between their ears. Mm-hmm. And with a Maverick and the idea of keeping your head on your shoulders, there's that gap, right? Yeah. And you won your first national 2-day match because you had worked your ass off. But finding those little edges of, can I be 5% more mentally sharp?
Yeah. Can I keep it there all day?
Yeah. For
stay
2
on
days.
That edge. Yep.
Yeah.
And the difference between winning that match and not winning that match was 2 or 3 shots. I don't know how much you won by, but people typically don't win by a huge margin. Right. Occasionally you see it, but largely your winner's winning by a couple shots.
Inside of 3 shots, for sure.
Yeah. And you've won matches with the Maverick the same way.
Yep.
Greg Bell, I know, has got a handful of wins with a Maverick on him. All of these come down to who was able not to be the best shooter, because there's a handful of shooters that are freaking excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Who could show up and execute that weekend. And that's a mental game as much or more than anything else.
Yep. And on that vein, stacking. This is just another way to stack an advantage in your favor. If you have all the best gear, you have all the right approach, and you're ready to go, but you can't stay with it through the duration of the weekend, this is just another small advantage that some people might say, hey, this is a bigger advantage to stop a rifle. And I'm like, look, if a 6.5 Creed without a break is too much for you, or with a break is just, now it's finally manageable, I think we're still not having the right fundamentals. This system, how that works in for having suppressors in the PRS, I think, is going to be a net positive for the growth of the sport over the long term. when ROs, how many ROs have said, hey man, thank you for running a suppressor. I know it's not quite a suppressor, but it's so much better because they've just watched 200 shooters come by, 10 rounds each. They got 2,000 blasts from here to Bryce.
Ken sent me, and I'll read from it here. One of the lines in like the rules for suppressor category is in the mission statement, which is enormously important. Let's see. This category is to recognize shooters not using a traditional break, and here's what matters, and to encourage retention for long-term shooters.
Yes.
You guys talk about it. You eat 10,000 rounds to the face in a year, you get less excited about showing up and doing it the next time. You know, you might not stop shooting because of it, but if interest wanes or you come back and for 3 days you can't really hear what your kid's saying to you. You know, some of these after effects, if it can be a safer sport long term or one that you're physically able to manage in longer term, absolutely.
Yeah. So the rules are out. Does the Maverick in this configuration count?
Yes. Ken confirmed to me in no uncertain terms, Maverick in all configurations works. And, you know, eventually someone is going to create truly a gamer suppressor that is one baffle with a break on it. And, you know, maybe or maybe not, that's in spirit of the rules. But the reality is even one baffle behind a break is going to make a tangible difference, a real difference when it comes to what's happening off the end of that rifle.
Yeah.
So essentially, if it has if you have to apply for a tax stamp, then it's going to fall into that category roughly. That's kind of what
that
it
is
boils
categorically
down to.
if you owned one of those without a tax stamp, you would be violating the law.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is a suppressor by definition.
Okay. Well, the next interesting thing is going to be, you talked about ROs and timers. Like, are we going to have a problem? The Maverick is kind of in between, but you do sometimes, depending on the sensitivity of the timers, not get it picked up. And it really, I don't like to see ROs tapping on the timers to get the timer to register the shot. So maybe we need to consider at this point, if somebody's running a fully suppressed gun, how do we manage that? And do we create something for the ROs to be able to manage that? Like some operating instructions.
Shot timers on sticks.
Yeah.
Have always been
but
a funny
I'm
one.
guessing
and they're big
sometimes
in
that
rimfire.
doesn't even work.
It does if it's set properly, but it's hard if you're alternating between a loud muzzle brake versus a suppressor, fully suppressed system, and you've got 20-foot spacing between stages. Yeah, you'll barely pick up a suppressor. This guy's brake will go off, and then a brake will get set off on another. So you may need one that's sort of designed for, hey, you have a suppressed version. But I think the sport will figure that out as it migrates, as it has for the last almost 15 years. We'll continue to grow. We'll continue to find ways to innovate and, frankly, push the boundaries to make it safer, more fun, and easier to shoot. The sport we love.
Precision Rifle Blog did their deal on suppressor use in the PRS. And, you know, the way that he organized it, he started with basically what suppressors do PRS shooters own. But if you scroll down the article, he actually gets into the ones that are being used in matches heavily. And this is where, you know, the bar chart, it's Maverick, everyone else. Because before this product, you know, and Leviathan tried it and had a tiny amount of traction. There wasn't really a product that was designed for this. I think that suppressor from Maverick to a 338 Ultra, a monster on somebody's can, suppressor use at matches is a single-digit percentage thing.
Yeah.
If this division or class or category can move that from 5 to 10% to 15 to 20%, matches become significantly more enjoyable for a lot of people, and they become more manageable. I think that'll happen. I don't think it happens overnight. Now, fortunately, you can run through a Form 4 right now in like 30 days. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it will happen. And at a high level, it'll happen more and more. And whether, again, it's Mavericks or anything else, your top level guy that shoots a ton, if there's just that little bit of push over the edge excuse to try something new,
$5,000 is a little bit of an
it's
a little push.
It's a few tax stamps.
and you don't even, and the guys will get to the end of the season, and somebody's going to win the money. But everyone else that's not is still going to get to the season, end of the season, and go, I'm in better shape than I was a year ago.
Yeah.
From a body management standpoint.
Well, we haven't had $5,000 for it in the last 4 years, and yet we're still running it. So we know that we're on the front edge of something that we've really enjoyed.
One of you two would have won that for the last handful of years. I can't imagine anybody else is finishing higher. A Maverick would have won it every year since its inception.
Yeah. I haven't looked at the standings, so I'm not sure on that. But yeah, we would be up there.
Nobody's winning matches at a high level consistently with anything but a Maverick in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
but it's meaningful. So
Yeah.
the products you make are awesome. The dedication that you put into not only call it your company, but the sport and the future that you have for this company between you, John, and Justin. Honestly, it's incredible to watch your momentum and your growth. And thank you for being on the podcast with us. Thank you for hosting us here and getting to see the first ever video variant of Miles to Matches. Maybe the only.
Does everyone know what you guys look like to all of your listeners? Because this may be like a weird reveal for some.
I don't know.
I doubt it.
Not trying to make you self-conscious, but it's
I-
gonna
I
be.
don't-
use some,
We go to matches and
Yeah, you're
there's
around a
people.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are picked out of a crowd enough to probably say that they
What,
might
what
know
percentage of your listeners do you believe have ever shown up and shot a match? I'm interested in that.
who we are. Actually, I can tell you it's
That's probably most.
probably in
Is
the
it most?
Yeah, I think so.
70 to 80%
Yeah.
range.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Good for
Knowing
you
the
guys.
size of the volume and also between 22 and center fire and how many people shoot center fire regional, it's probably
The
in the
curious
60
thing
to
is how many
60,
different
70%.
countries. There's like 48 different
Oh, yeah.
countries. that
That's
listen.
amazing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of wild.
We're syndicated.
Yes.
Now,
That's
is there anything that you want to say to? So, as our way of saying thank you, is there anything
Yeah.
you want to talk about specifically to anybody who's listening to quote Miles of Matches as a video podcast? Anything you want to talk about for upcoming 2025? et cetera?
Well, and for me, I don't know what comes next for you guys in Miles to Matches. I don't know how Miles to Matches, what the next 5 years of it looks like. But from our perspective, we're grateful to what you guys are doing as well. You know, we talk about how the sport's changed and the information game, the sharing of it, it's been so big. I don't believe that there is any other alternative for somebody who's interested in the precision rifle series specifically to get so much intimate, dirty, gritty details as they can possibly pull out of Miles to Matches. Nobody delivers that amount of content, that amount of detail with that regularity. No one else does it. The sport and the community are better for it. And whether it's somebody who ever steps up to the firing line or is just interested in learning about theoretical shooting, how to compete, how to be a man, how to win inside of this, how to separate hard things from doable things, we appreciate what you've done. And as well as individuals and what you've done in both of you in your professional experience. It feels really good to be a part of a community that's interested in making something better, not simply making something bigger so that it can be more profitable or whatever.
Exactly.
Or nitpicking things that aren't perfect. You know,
Nothing's
that,
perfect.
That annoys the hell out of me. We're focusing on nitpicking a few things when the greater good of it is like just so amazing. I remember we were doing some recordings in the gun room, and we told you we were thinking
your
about
bags.
doing a we told you, well, we're thinking about doing a podcast, and I kind of got like, okay, cool, we'll see, because there's a lot of shooting podcasts, right? There is.
And
There
as
were a
you
lot
guys
that
have found
started.
out,
Yeah.
content over and over and it being good and it having a
Yeah.
purpose is really difficult. And you guys nailed it with your format of on the way to or from the match.
Yeah, that's all we can. That's all we have time for.
But
And honestly,
it was such like a built-in purpose,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
You had a good time that you were going to do it. You had a thing you were talking about, something you were working on. You were together, trapped, basically.
Trapped.
Yeah, it was a perfect format.
Yeah.
So kudos, you nailed
Yeah.
it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what it's going to do for the next year or 2 years. We're still working on what we want to achieve with it. But short term, we expect to continue doing Miles to Matches into 2025. We're just trying to find the right format and ways to.
You're
help
welcome to
bring
the
more
studio when
value.
it makes sense. Sorry, Bryce. No,
Yeah.
but you're welcome to the studio when it makes sense for you.
Maybe we'll
I
just
don't
have to
have to
fly
be
down
here.
here
Bring
weekly.
it to
There's an
people.
airport that's pretty close. So.
It's 10 minutes away. I'll pick you up.
Yeah.
And we just want a fighter jet escort. We see they're at the other end of the runway, so we just
We
want
get flyovers like every day. We've
That's
got
awesome.
bald eagles out the back. The days that we get, because the flagpole's in the back, if we get F-16s and bald eagles and the flag float, there is, in my humble opinion, no more patriotic place in America. So you're welcome to time.
Well, as the last thing we want to ask you, because if you've made it this far, there's always a cool tidbit. And in this tidbit, please tell us how you name products. I know what it is, and I want to hear. So before you hear the answer to this, I want you to understand. Go ahead and name a few products in this line.
Hellfire, Sidewinder, Maverick.
Do you know where those came from? And if so, smile. If not, Craig.
Our muzzle devices, the families, are all named after U.S. missile systems. Hellfire missiles, Sidewinder missiles, Maverick missiles. And in doing that, there were like Patriot's a good one, but other people are using that. So we wanted to go something that was catchy and made sense, but was also part of military armament. John started that way with Hellfire and Sidewinder, and then Maverick needed to follow that as well.
Yeah. Well,
Perfect.
it's very cool. It's something that I've always noticed about them, and I look forward to seeing the next iteration of the AIM, which is probably not that cool, but there might be find something cool. So
Yeah.
with all that said, we have a way of leaving every podcast, and that is, you know the drill. Own it every day.
Because the match has already started.